Lead Squared is a cutting-edge CRM platform for enrollment management. With Lead Squared, you will deliver a seamless student experience, streamline admissions processes, lower costs, and increase retention. Schedule a demo at leadsquared.com. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio back with you as we fast approach 500 episodes of this podcast, which is pretty insane. I podcast in my sleep. I podcast while I eat. I podcast almost every day, in fact. And it never gets old because my guests are always interesting and bring energy, even when I'm tired, which is actually pretty rare because I drink like 3 cups of coffee a day and bounce off the walls. But when I do get tired, my guest brings energy always and new perspective within this amazing industry we work in called higher education. If you all didn't know, I have a couple of plugs that I'm going to give, self-plugs. Let's call it gratuitous self-plugging here. As you may know, Elvin and I are headed to Anthology 2022 in beautiful Orlando, Florida, on the Dolphin Swan and Resort campus in Disney for Anthology 2022, where we'll talk to Anthology users. They get a whole setup for us with like chairs and all this stuff, and then people kind of walk by and they go, what is this business here with these microphones? And nobody comes over for a couple of minutes, and then all of a sudden we got a line of 30 people that want to sit down and talk to us, which is cool. And secondarily that, and just as important, I'm writing a book with my co-author, Kate Colbert, called Commencement at the Beginning of a New Era in Higher Education. It would help if I can get my own title right. But we're taking over 100, and I say over 100 college and university presidents that we have interviewed on this podcast, and we are synthesizing all of the most common and most important trends that have been discussed, and we are putting it into a book. And that is now available for bulk pre-order at our website, commencementthebook.com, commencementthebook.com, all one word. And that means that you educational leaders out there can order, 25 copies or 50 copies or 25,000 copies, whatever you'd like, to train your staff or hand them out as gifts or whatever you'd like. We are excited and we appreciate your support. We would have never done it without you. There's too much knowledge. We got to put it into a book. Speaking of somebody with just too much knowledge, the knowledge is just coming out of his ears right now. There's so much knowledge. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, my guest today. He is the president of the University of West Los Angeles, and his name is Robert Brown. Robert, how are you?
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's really a privilege to be here this morning.
I have to thank you for sitting through all of that ridiculousness, 2 minutes of gratuitous plug-in that I did. So I appreciate it.
Actually, it was very informative.
Well, thank you, sir. Well, what will be more informative is you talking about the University of West Los Angeles. Let's level set for the audience. What do you guys do and how do you do it?
We are a law and business school situated in Los Angeles and in the San Fernando Valley. We have 2 campuses and we have 2 programs, essentially. We have been accredited by the California State Bar since 1966. In the state of California, our program is fully accredited, fully makes our students eligible to sit for the California Bar. They do not have to take the baby bar. And we've been doing that, as I said before, since 1966. We have produced thousands of lawyers and hundreds of judges, and we're very proud of that. Our business school is a more recent innovation within the last 10 years, but we have a bachelor's degree program that we couple with the community colleges in the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. We provide the final 2 years of the bachelor's program, the bachelor's degree, the 3rd and the 4th year. And we have a master's degree in organizational leadership and business innovation and in leadership, management, and technology.
That's incredible. All right, so here's the first question I have to ask you, and I've been waiting for you, because this is like the most uncommon thing to be an attorney and have a career in law and end up in higher education, even if you're in education, at law school and you're an attorney, because it's just mind-blowing. How do you end up in higher ed as a university president, Robert? Tell me what that journey looks like.
How much time do we have?
We have as much as you want, but your team said they'd cut me off.
I'm not really a career academician. I'm really a corporate business banking lawyer. I started my career out of law school at UCLA in the 70s. I started out as a corporate business banking lawyer doing specializing in real estate and finance transactions. But actually, it's a great segue into uh, education, higher education in particular, because most of the small institutions are actually businesses. And one of the things that you do when you're a banking business lawyer putting together deals like I did, billions of dollars of deals when I was in the corporate banking business world. Um, you also help transactions that are not doing so well, and you try to help businesses get back on their feet. So I developed a specialty in what they call workouts, which are helping businesses that are having real problems repaying their debts. The bank will send you in and you'll kind of restructure or see how you can make some corrections to help them. So I developed an expertise in that. And I also taught for the state bar, continuing education of the bar. I taught at Cal State LA for a number of years where I graduated undergrad because I wanted to give back to first generation students like myself and first generation college goers, I should say.
Amazing.
And so I wanted to, I always had a penchant for education, but lawyering was always my first love. Lo and behold, the University of West LA was having some very severe problems. They were trying to transition from their original founders, and there had been no true succession plan. And so I was invited by some of their board members to be on the board. About a year later, they invited me to become the president. And even though the situation was very dire at the time, it was a challenge for me. I love the mission. I love what we do for higher education. I love what UWLA stands for. I love the community that it serves, our stakeholders. Many people were like myself. I'm from South Central Los Angeles originally, grew up, very impoverished community. But for education, I would probably be a statistic. In all sincerity, as were most of the kids that I grew up with, they are statistics now. And so I wanted to change that paradigm. I didn't have the vision at the time when I started the banking career. Although, I did want to go into banking so I could learn how business was done, so I could go back to our community. I thought the heart of the problems for much of the illicit activities that were happening, the criminality, if you will, I think that they were really rooted in socioeconomic causes. And I wanted to learn how business is done so I could bring that back to my community and all impoverished communities that were the subject of suppression, and to see if I can't find a way to make things better. And, it's just one of those things where, preparation met opportunity.
What has more regulations? Corporate lawyering or higher education compliance?
I laugh. You're absolutely. It's so funny because I tell a lot of my colleagues in higher education, really my earlier career in banking, which has so much regulation, and I'm still associated with banking. I'm on the board of a bank. It has so much regulation, but very similarly to what higher education is experiencing. So it's interesting that you should draw that parallel, because both industries are just so highly regulated, and there's just so much. We finished our financial aid audit yesterday,
Ooh,
so happy to have that over with. So happy to have that over with. But yes, I mean there's a direct parallel, and I might say that my banking career really, going back to your earlier comments about how do you find yourself, my banking career really prepared me to really be very respectful and cognizant of the regulatory framework for higher education.
And by the way, the audience, and you might hear some hammering. They're doing some construction outside of my office. Nothing I can do about it, but it's not an actual sound effect I press here, just ladies and gentlemen. But I find this fascinating, Robert, because when I talk to people who come out from outside of higher education, particularly in industries that are highly regulated, and they get to higher ed and they go, how could this be? How could this be so highly regulated? We know there's financial aid, but there's regulations on private universities and the different tax status of universities that it's just like literally mind blowing. And the other reason why it's so fascinating, because of your background in banking, which I wanted to bring this up on purpose, is because higher ed, just like any other business, and just like any other individual, when you're trying to be successful, it kind of comes down to one thing immediately:
money.
And when you understand business, both as an individual, especially if you're from a lower economic population, people of color, understanding money and finding yourself in a career like corporate banking and understanding money allows you to not only give back, but it allows you to develop generational wealth. And that's a big differentiator when it comes to equity. And all around your background, the personal and the professional, and going in to run a college, you have to fix the money problems, right? You got to fix the money problems in order to be successful.
Especially when you're tuition driven. One of the first things that I learned when we were having some real difficulties when I stepped in. The university was really about to almost hit its demise. Yeah, it was really dire. But the key to it was understanding that we were tuition driven, and without any type of federal or state support subsidies, even as a not-for-profit, which we were at the time. I'm the one who actually converted it to a for-profit, but it was a not-for-profit at the time. It was extremely difficult because people don't understand. Small universities do not have the attractiveness to really bring in the donor base, the funding that they really need from charitable sources, I should say. And so you spend money to try to attract that money, but most of your, like in our case, our population, our alumni, are first generation college graduates. So they don't have the discretionary income. They haven't built that wealth up. And then the second piece of it, I'll share a story with you. This is a true story. I went after we turned it around, things were really starting to prosper again. One of our donors, whose name I will not mention, but a really major player in the legal profession, called me up and said, Bob, you're doing such a great job. I really appreciate the way you really rebuilt the university and sustained its reputation. Let's have lunch. I want to give you something. And so I went to the restaurant, and he was sitting there, and I sat down across from him and pushed over an envelope. I opened up the envelope, and there was $5,000 in it. And he said, this is just a small little token of what we would, what my wife and I would like to provide to the university for all you've done for us. I graduated from UWLA. I've now, got this big law firm, et cetera, et cetera. He says, I'm sorry, I couldn't give you more, but we gave $10 million to another major university last week. Okay.
Right.
And how do you compete with that? And it was a very worthy. They gave to the Eye Institute, the hospital wing of a major university. I can't compete with that. And so as a small institution, you find yourself constantly battling against that and trying to meet your budgets and trying to remain sustainable in the face of being tuition driven. And there's a compression, especially for the for-profits, of the 90-10 rule, which really puts a real downward pressure on your ability to grow. So you're battling against yourself. On the one hand, you've got to try to boost enrollments to increase your tuition. But on the other hand, you've got this pressure not to grow because your students are not allowed to, your funding, not more than 10% of your funding can come from cash sources. So if you exceed that, if more than 90% of your funding comes from other than cash sources, from other than
You
cash
got it,
sources, you can't grow. So it's really a real, it's very difficult in higher education to match the competition.
Yeah, that's such an important point. And I think the 90-10 reg is the biggest BS in the history of higher ed. Then you can call me, I worked in for-profit education for 15 years. It is the single hardest thing to navigate. And for our listeners, that especially from nonprofits out there, because I know we have a ton of people from nonprofits that listen, many institutions who are tuition dependent have 97%, 96%, 99% of their net tuition revenue, or even gross tuition, coming from tuition, from tuition. And those that have it lower, which the accreditor generally for nonprofits wants it at about 70% from tuition and 30% from other sources. One of the ways those other sources comes in is fundraising. It's endowment. It's all these things. And when you're a small university and you don't have the ability to get big donors in, it puts up your overall gross tuition revenue into the 90s sometimes. For profits, there's a requirement, the 90-10 rule, that says 10% has to be from other revenue sources, basically cash. And what happened when for-profits started getting in trouble in the 2010s, and you know probably more than I do, Bob, here about because you're an attorney and all this, but for-profits used to increase the price of their tuition by 10%. So that they could basically, so you'd have a student and the government would say you have to have 10% come from cash. So your $20,000 tuition on whatever program goes to $22,000. So because you have to pass on that to the consumer and meet a regulation. Or you set up paid sources like massage therapy clinics or personal training sessions, or you did these things to bring in cash and it creates a whole nother wing of the business that other universities do not have to deal with and don't have the business knowledge, frankly, to deal with. It's an important distinction because it puts pressure on the president of an institution like University of West Los Angeles, on the operators and those running the schools to be really geniuses, frankly, to bring in that cash to meet that reg.
Well, let's also, put it in context. The for-profits got a really bad name because of what happened in the early 2000s.
100%.
And it was driven by venture capitalists. What happened was there were venture capitalists who came in and who, literally and figuratively capitalized on education, and they exploited the tuition nature of our business. It's important to keep those actors out, no question. But you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The regulations that were then placed on the for-profit wing, which, by the way, there's no differential in the actual education. Let's also make that clear as well. I think that we do an outstanding job of really adhering to our accreditation standards. We're accredited by the Western Association of Schools and Colleges. We're accredited by the California State Bar. Our students must pass one of the most rigorous state bars, in the United States. So we have that rigorousness of our education. Our academic quality cannot be impugned at all. But the other side of it is that we do have this barrier, if you will, because we are a for-profit, and I ask in many instances, we condemn the for-profits just for being for-profits, but think about it. Who's typically the highest paid employee of many of these elite public schools, or private schools for that matter, who are for-profits? Who's the highest paid employee? It's a football coach.
You got that right. And what's the football coach do? Bring in lots of profit for the university.
Lots of donations. It's all for reputation. And don't get me wrong, I don't condemn at all my brethren for doing that. Everybody should do things the way that they do. But this other side of it is that it's particularly perilous for an institution like a small institution like ours because of the community that we serve. we serve an underserved community for the most part, in large sources. We serve people who, are working class people who are trying to come back to get their educations while they're taking care of their families. Many times they're first generation people. These are the people who need access to the loans and can't necessarily afford the cash, the out of pocket. And even though we try to make our tuition extremely reasonable, nonetheless, we still are up against this barrier of the 90-10. And so it works to suppress the very communities that we are trying to uplift and who most people will say need the services of an institution like ours. So, I'm very passionate about it. But the other side of it is that I told you a little bit about my background. I'm rooted in going back to a community that I came from, that I barely escaped. That I barely escaped. And my thought, again, was trying to lift future generations from the oppression and suppression that it's been subjected to by bringing education, which is how people traditionally have, changed their socioeconomic status through education. And it's so important.
Let's just be honest, but we'll say it right here live on the EdUp Experience. For-profits are in it, or we're in it to make a profit so they can invest that money back into the business. And nonprofits are in it not to make money. They don't want, no nonprofit wants to make any money, right? They want to lose money continuously year over year forever. Of course, that's not true, but that's the implication of saying that we're nonprofit and, we care more about the student, is that a for-profit, that a nonprofit doesn't want to make surplus or profit or whatever you call it. It's if there is any convergence of those models, it is these models that we are dealing with today in higher education, where many, many, many nonprofit universities are in huge cash-strapped businesses now, and they are looking to try to make more money to support their institution.
Exactly right, Joe.
What I'll tell you, one of the things that you said that is really coming up out of curiosity for me is you're talking about the underserved right now. You're talking about a lower income population in Los Angeles. Do they typically want to be attorneys? And this is because you think about putting food on the table, fast path to graduation. Are they going for trade skill programs and then looking to become is your age range different than an 18-year-old coming out of high school kind of thing? Talk to me about the interest in becoming an attorney, or because I know your business college is probably, that makes more sense, right? You understand business or want to, but what about being a lawyer? Do you see a lot of kids coming out, or even young adults saying, I want to be an attorney?
Oh my gosh. We had our graduation 2 weeks ago, and we had people graduating. I mean, anywhere. Our youngest graduate, believe it or not, this is the youngest, I've been there 24 years. We had our youngest graduate of all time, who was 20 years old. The young man is just an absolute genius.
Amazing.
Can you imagine getting his Juris Doctorate degree at 20 years old?
I cannot imagine that.
He graduated from college, I think, at 16.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just absolutely amazing. But our oldest graduate was very close to her 70s, late 60s.
Okay.
So I think that, again, what I'm so proud of UWLA about is the fact that we serve such a large variation of a large demographic. And it comes with all kinds of dreams. And that's what I'm so passionate about. We have the career person who deferred their dream to become a lawyer. What they wanted to do was, become a lawyer very early on. And unfortunately, they had to take care of their family, they had to provide for their family. Their family started growing up. They had to put children through college, et cetera, first before they were able to actually start to pursue their dream. But lo and behold, because of UWLA, they came back and were able to get their Juris Doctorate degree. And the practice of law, you can do it at any stage in your life. And it's very entrepreneurial. There are people who practice in group contexts. There are people who go back and practice in business contexts. And then there are just people who practice individually. And so we serve that range. Let me tell you a little short story, if I could. about 4 or 5 years ago, we had just finished up one of our graduations, and I always go backstage afterwards, and I kind of make certain everything was okay. And had my back turned, and I felt a presence behind me, and a man walked up to me. He said, "President Brown, I just want to thank you," and he had tears in his eyes. And he said, I said, what for? He said, "What? You made my daughter's dream come true today." And I said, "What are you talking about?" He said, "Well, um, my daughter got accepted to a major law school in Los Angeles. And in her first year, she fell in love and got pregnant and decided that she had to drop out of law school to take care of her baby and her family. Dropped out of that law school, major elite school, and had to defer her dream for 10 or 15 years while she was, raising her family and raising her children. And on that particular day, she found UWA, came back to it, and graduated from UWA. She passed the bar by the time we had the graduation. She'd already passed the bar, and her father was just in tears because we had presented that re-entry point for her, and so we have a lot of stories like that. We have those stories all the way from the typical traditional college graduate, the young person who comes in. And by the way, it's from all different ethnicities, all different walks of life. We have some very wealthy people who are affiliated and who have graduated through University of West LA as well. So we have the whole range. And I'm just so proud of what we do and what we contributed to our community. We have a number of different judges, as I said before, who are sitting as judges, but also sometimes law was a second career for them as well. So it could be so many different ways that people can capture that dream to become a lawyer. And I'm proud to also say that now we're starting to do it in the business world as well. We've got people who didn't think that they could do it. They didn't think they could become business leaders, and they're in an organization, and the organization said, "Hey, listen, University of West LA is there. It's a smaller environment, more suitable for a lot of people." And so now they've come back and they've come to our programs, whether it be our master's program or our bachelor's program. And in some instances, they've been subsidized by their particular organizations that they're already affiliated with. And then they go on to management positions and leadership positions within those organizations. And it's really beautiful to watch.
The Lead Squared integrated CRM functionality will put your institution at the front end of marketing and enrollment strategy by delivering a streamlined admissions process. Capture student interest, segment your audience, create student engagement workflows, and even integrate with your student information system to create longitudinal key performance metrics you've always wanted. You can do all of this and lower your technology costs. Check out leadsquared.com for more info. I love that. I love that story because those happen all the time, especially when you're in the business of serving a student that comes from a lower economic background, or they haven't had that infrastructure of support, and being able to provide those wraparound student services. Like I know many for-profit student, in fact, that model of student service has been replicated in nonprofits. All right, let's be honest. That's where effective models of mentoring and success come from in the nonprofit space, is originally from the for-profits who invented it in the first place, right? So you get to wrap those services around students and see those tiers come across graduation. It makes it all worth it. What keeps your engine running, Bob? Because these haven't been easy times. Why do you keep doing it? And what do you see for the future of UWLA?
It's like what we just talked about, Joe. You have the graduations, and you see the people whose lives you've been able to touch and to hopefully uplift. I shouldn't tell you this, but quite frankly, sometimes when I'm by myself and I look back on some of the challenges and hurdles that we've had to face as an institution in some of our darkest days, I shudder to think about the times when I even gave any consideration to perhaps not, continuing. I think that as
We
I
all have
see
those moments.
as I think about, as I look at people and the dreams that we've helped to be achieved and captured, and I think for even a second I might have entertained not, continuing on the road to making the institution as sustainable as we are presently. I, to be quite candid with you, I kind of sink inside. But the other side of that is that seeing those people, getting the letters and the emails expressing just how much the University of West LA and what we've done for particular individuals, providing them with this educational opportunity, that just inspires me every day. I mean, I get up every day and I can't, truthfully, to be honest with you, I think I have one of the best jobs in the world. I think I'm just so fortunate to have been able to, be in a position where, I had this dream, 50 years ago of coming back to our lost beautiful city that I love, and helping to hopefully in some small respects. And I must admit, we're small, and hopefully we'll be a model for other institutions as well. But the other side of it is that we know we need this upliftment in our communities. It's through education that people are going to be able to better themselves. And as you also mentioned, generationally, we've got to think about the next generation, because we have at UWLA, we have a really cute little process where at graduation, if you have a parent or a sibling who graduated from UWLA, we invite them up to the stage to help them hood the
Good
student.
for you.
Okay, and we in many instances let them walk across the stage with their children, etc. But that's what inspires other generations. That's what's going to really uplift the next generation. When the parents, I tell people all the time when we're recruiting, you don't realize the impact that you're having on your kids while they're watching you pursue your education. And the other piece of it is that, again, many of the problems that are rooted in our communities are a function of people not having the ability to uplift themselves. They've lost hopelessness. If I hear about one more of these kids, these drive-by shootings in these communities, but they're doing it because they have now aligned themselves with these illicit factions within the community because they've lost hope. And I'm one of those kids who was out there at one point in time, invisible, hopeless, no alliances, no support systems. And so you do start to do illicit things because you don't think anybody cares, and you have no hope. So, in my mind, UWLA is a place where we go out. My son the other day was out at a restaurant. He met a young kid, and they started to kind of talk, and the kid said, my son asked him, "Where are you from?" And he said, "I'm from Compton." And my son said, he said, "I'm so happy. I just became the lead on the valet here at the hotel." And my son said, "You seem like such a bright young man. Why don't you get an education?" He said, "Well, I can't afford it. I can't afford it." My son said, "Hey, listen, here's my card. You call me. How much education do you have? Have you been to community college? We'll align you with one of our community college partners. We're going to get you in here, and we're going to help you to get an education." And the young man started crying on the spot.
Amazing.
And I when I think about that story, I mean, that young man was probably me 60 years ago. So and
that's not possible. You're only 35.
That's true.
I don't know, 60 years. That's an exaggeration.
But again, my son said my father grew up in South Central LA, and we wanted to come. Our whole mission is to kind of reach back and help people where we can, and that's what we love about our business and what we do.
I want you to just take that one step further, because we talk about this all the time on EdUp with really everybody, and that's this value of higher ed, and it's being questioned, and you wonder how are communities, especially urban communities, even questioning it more because they already feel like they can't afford it. And then you hear all the noise about, you don't need to go to college. You're going to be just as successful. You're going to be Elon Musk. You're going to be all these great things if you don't. And you have a little line, you have a background up right now, and it says liberation through educational empowerment. I love those words together. Talk about value. Are you convincing students still? Do they see higher ed to still have value? In particular, you're in the urban communities of Los Angeles.
Well, again, I have that unique background of being originally in corporate banking. So when someone told me earlier on, you need to know how to do business because business is really very dynamic. It's very challenging. People think that just because you make a product or a service, that's enough for you to be able to do business. No, that is a real recipe for failure. You must know how businesses run. You must know how to take care of your financial aspects of your business, how to look at your profit and loss, how to look at your balance sheet, how to look at your budgets. You need to know how all of your financial dynamics come to play to make your business a success. Because you can have the best products and services, but if you don't know how to conduct your business, it's a recipe for failure. And remember, banks have people like me, and I have a degree in finance as well as my law degree, who just do nothing but put together structured deals, but also help businesses when they are not doing so well. So as a value proposition, and that's one of the reasons why we focused on business and law, because almost everything everyone does, even from the standpoint of view of not-for-profit services, being in the social services business, those are still businesses and they must still be run as a business. And people need to know the dynamics, the factors that come into play to make the running and operation and management of those businesses. In Los Angeles, in California, we have a very tough regulatory framework for employment. Employment in the state of California is very difficult. There's a lot of rules and regulations that are very difficult to traverse. So not only must you know them from a management standpoint of view, but from a legal standpoint of view as well. So I'm perhaps getting a little bit afar from your question, but you need these skill sets, both in the law and in business, to really be able to be successful, even if your product or service is very productive.
It's interesting you say that because not a lot of people know that. I actually, it's funny. I was in Ontario, California. I lived Ontario and Chino Hills, California, which is basically a little bit further east of Orange County, maybe like northeast. We could have done this in person had this been a couple months ago. I'd have driven over to you. But I just moved out of California, where I spent 4 years. Now I'm in Missouri at my new gig at Lindenwood University. And one of my my assistant vice president for financial aid is also from California. And we're talking about these staff issues. And then we both look at each other and go, wait, we can do that here in Missouri? We can't do that in California, right? So there is literally, when you're talking about regs in the employment arena, California is crazy. I don't want to say crazy, but it's highly regulated.
It's highly regulated, and it's very difficult to navigate. Excuse me.
No, that's okay. The other, this is just a fascinating, but I say this to a lot of people. Sometimes I mean it, sometimes I just say it, but I could talk to you all day, but I would then take up all your time and you wouldn't have as many great student stories to tell, and I'd probably get fired from my job. So we're going to keep this all within a good time frame here. But I appreciate the work that you do because I think colleges like yours are so, so very important. And you also are in one of those most competitive states for higher education. I think you could probably take a golf ball or a baseball and throw it to Cal State Northridge from your campus. California has so many community colleges, so many state colleges, so many private colleges. It's insane. How do you stay relevant? What is it? What's the strategy, with messaging, the brand, because it's just so highly competitive, and particularly in that region?
It is, but again, like you were saying earlier, we know what our niche is, and our niche is to provide an environment, a more friendly, nurturing environment, what we like to call a more family-oriented environment, where our students come in, and we know the student for most part. We try to give them a little bit more specialized attention. We try to provide them a little bit more support. We put a little bit more emphasis on enhancing their skill set, because many times our students come to us and their initial foundational educational capabilities are not as fine-tuned as they might otherwise be in some of our competitor schools, where they follow the more traditional model. So we provide them with a more nurturing. It's a rigorous environment. Again, like I said before, we're accredited by Western Association of Schools and Colleges, which is one of the most uh, highly sought after accrediting bodies, and they hold us to rigorous standards. So, and in particular, as a for-profit, we must make certain that we meet those standards of really higher education. But given that, within that platform, we also try to make certain that we are student-centered and student-responsive, and that we provide the student with that nurturing environment that hopefully will inspire them and give them the confidence to be successful in higher education.
I want to just double down on the point that you made about accreditation, because it is easily forgotten amongst the different communities and sectors within higher ed. Because a for-profit institution is your institution is accredited by WASC, which go to the Pac-12, pick a school in the Pac-12, they will also be accredited by WASC. So
That's right.
Educational quality is not valid in an argument in nonprofit and for-profit. I'm sorry, it's just not. And somebody says, oh, it's a for-profit, then that's just the lesser quality. No, WASC holds you to the same exact standards of any major university you can think of that's accredited by WASC. And when I say major universities, you know which ones I'm talking about. They're usually in the top 5 in college football or somewhere. So without naming names. So
and I must say, Joe, WASC has been very supportive of us. I must tell you, they have been there for us, and I hate to sound like I'm being self-serving, but WASC has been so supportive of their leadership. President Studley, Mark Gore, the people there at WASC, have really tried to make certain that we are welcome as a small for-profit institution, along with our more bigger, perhaps more elite brethren. They've made certain to extend themselves to make me feel welcome within that framework.
Love it. So what did we not say about the University of West Los Angeles today, Bob, that you would want to say? Anything that you have going on, announcements, speaking opportunities you have for yourself, plug away. And then secondarily to that, what do you see as the future of higher education?
Well, let me speak to that second one first, okay? Because I'm really excited. I think that I would love to hear the communications from other people as well. Whereas initially, let me tell you another real quick story.
I love stories.
So our people came to us. It was perhaps sometime early February 2020, when COVID was first setting in, and we were looking around, and the communities and counties in the states were starting to shut down now because of COVID. And I remember we had a meeting, and we said, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to provide education if people can't come to campus? And we obviously, started talking about our options and the various platforms we could go on to, and in particular Zoom. And I said, well, when are we going to have the plans for this? And they said, well, President Brown will get back to you first part of next week. And I said, how do you guys know that we have until next week? And we immediately went out and I said, stop, let's contact Zoom, because we're going to get run over by the herd if we don't, contact them and get our platforms. We made a really good transition to online education. Very fortunately, we made certain that we had people supporting our professors and our students as that transition occurred who were actually in the classroom. I say that all that to say is that I believe that we learned a lot about the future of education from those dire circumstances. And now we've emerged, and now it's really going to be interesting to see how education is going to now be provided. Is it going to be on campus? We have two campuses, and I believe that there will be a need for a facility. However, it's unclear to me exactly how that facility will be utilized. We've got two beautiful facilities, one in the San Fernando Valley, one in Los Angeles. I believe we're going to have to create facilities that attract students to come to the facility, not just for education, but for collaboration, for collegiality, okay, where they are attractive places for people to socialize. I think people still want to socialize. If you go out into the malls, people still want to be there. We're social animals. We're social animals. So we want to connect with one another in person to the extent possible. They have to be safe environments. But the other part of it is that, especially in Los Angeles, where we have to deal with traffic congestion, there are times, and in particular for our students who are working class students, who are people who are trying to traverse various regions of the city, sometimes it may be easier for them to just go home and participate and pursue their education from their bedrooms on their computers. But
we have to mention the gas prices that affect that now too.
And not to mention gas prices, okay? And so we're building our facilities so that students will have the option. That's what I want people to know. We want people to have the option. We want them to be able to, hopefully come to our facilities. But by the same token, if they can't participate in their classrooms through online education, through, and hybrid modalities, and all of those are available now. The technology is there. We spent almost over $500,000 recently to provide that, to put that technology into our classrooms, to provide our professors and our students a multitude of options with which to be able to come together to pursue their education. The other piece of it is that I really like our faculty model. We bring in people from outside who are industry experts, who now have a passion for training, a passion for education, so that they are teaching the things that they've been practicing, whether it be in the law or in business. I put it out there. I want our students to learn on Friday something that they can utilize the following Monday. I went to a school where, quite candidly, I did not know how to practice law when I came out of law school. I had no clue. But what we try to do is we bring in some of the top practitioners and judges in our region, and they are our professors, and they are instilling in our students the skill sets to be able to go out the following day, the following week, the following month within their particular industries, but within their particular companies, and actually provide those services and become managers and leaders or lawyers who actually know how to get things done. So that's kind of the model that we hopefully that we're trying to follow, and hopefully will be a successful model.
Well, I guarantee you folks one thing. I've made myself a new friend in Robert Brown here, and I want to tell you all, and I mean this sincerely as somebody who is absolutely biased to the for-profit sector because I worked there for 15 years. Most people who work in for-profit education don't go, hey, I want to work in for-profit education. They say, I want to help students, and I want to do it because I have a passion for it. So the hardest working, most passionate people I've ever encountered in my life came from my time in the for-profit sector, because they were just student obsessed and passionate to help people, especially those from a lower economic background, succeed. It was their life's work. Somebody whose life's work it is to do that is my guest today, ladies and gentlemen, Robert Brown. Robert, did you have a good EdUp experience today?
Oh, Joe, this has been wonderful. I'm so gratified. I must tell you, we've been trying to get our story out there, and again, we've been sort of invisible for various reasons. And to have this opportunity to talk with you, and especially as enthusiastic as you are, because of your enthusiasm, you've enabled me to feel empowered to tell my story and to tell the story of UWLA. And I'm always indebted to you. And I'm sorry that you are in Missouri, only because I could drive over and we could have, break some bread face to face.
You never know.
Because
might happen.
Well, the invitation is always there. The invitation is always there, my friend. And I hope that perhaps someday you'll allow me to come back, because I really enjoyed this conversation. As you can tell, I love what we do at UWLA, and I love the difference that we make in our community. We need to change this whole narrative about how not only for-profits, but how small institutions like ours can serve and be competitive. The bigger schools, unfortunately, that they have a more strident structure where they can't be as flexible as a smaller institution can be to meet the needs of their students. They just can't do it. They're just too rigid. They're too big. And that's not a knock on them. It's just the way that, but one size doesn't have to fit all. And that's the key, is that UWLA is another size, another option, another opportunity, I think, for people to, find a way to be successful in their lives and to provide for their families. At the end of the day, isn't that what it's all about? It's all about providing with your family. It's about, doing the things to make yourself comfortable within your community, to make our community safer, and for everybody to be uplifted. The key is, it's just terrible that we live in a society, here in LA, you drive the streets and you see the homeless people, and we don't have a sensitivity for that. We don't seem to care about that. Well, many of those people perhaps are suffering from economic blows that if they had had the education, maybe they would have been able to bypass and overcome. And so for me, UWLA is, something that a vehicle, if you will, that I hope I can give back and help uplift, as I said before, our community.
I encourage the audience out there to check out Robert Brown and the work he's doing at the University of West Los Angeles. As I know from so many other higher education leaders, partnerships are one very, very valid and important way we can all move this ball forward together. I guarantee you Robert's open to partnerships, and it's all about helping students one way or the other. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is. He's Robert Brown. He's president of the University of West Los Angeles, and he's my guest today in the EdUp Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. LeadSquared isn't only an enrollment CRM. It's a technology that will allow you to optimize your entire front-end student lifecycle by providing decision makers with real-time customizable dashboards. Forecasting, measuring, and optimizing for key activities will increase retention and revenue, and LeadSquared will lower technology costs simultaneously. Not only can LeadSquared align with existing admissions processes, but the technology will also help you innovate beyond what you thought was possible. The ability to access data on your phone will keep you connected, and when you add in the world-class customer service, LeadSquared transcends being a technology. It's an experience. Check them out at leadsquared.com.